I know it's got Ruby in the name, but for some reason, I thought it would be a little bit more bold. So over the last couple of months, we've been going through the Kaweco ink line, and now we're starting to hit that final stretch. Today's ink is Ruby Red, and once again, we are in cartridge form. Now, if you're a longtime viewer of the channel, then you know that I tend to have strong opinions of colors, especially red. And there are a few reasons behind that. Though turquoise tends to be my favorite color, I do find that red just happens to be better at conveying emotion. And I also find that red is not good at getting my camera to focus on it. There we go. So, case in point, how many of you immediately associate red with negativity thanks to a teacher that was markup happy on your homework? Or how many of you instead associate red with passion? I mean, that right there is why I'm very picky about the color red. As a former history major, I tend to prefer reds that remind me of some of the empires that I liked to study. So enough setup, let's take a look at this ink. Given what I just said, the ink blot is setting this one up to not be in the favorites category. Well, that and it comes out looking a little flat. On the plus side, the tones on the right are very reminiscent of rough crystal and ruby, so at least it's on point there. I'm more used to rich, like red rubies, and that's just not on display. On the upper left, we do have a deeper pinkish burgundy, and aside from just being darker, the left mids overall maintain the rough cut ruby look. I will at least say though, I like the pinkish wine reds that are in the darker portions of the transitions that partner nicely with the velvety pinkish maroon in the lighter transitions. Moving on over to dry time, we get a tale of two performances. On Rhodia, this one is dry from a broad nib by the 10-second mark, and you can see on the sample that the line is rather bold. We're gonna have to look at that a little bit later in the writing sample. When we move on over to Tomoe though, this ink becomes a non-starter for me, and that is unfortunate. Though we have a nice bold line here, I don't like the color enough to put up with a 20-second dry time. And that brings us around to the water test. Long and short of it, keep this ink away from water. As soon as water hits the page, the color lift is pretty intense. While there are a few inks where this isn't much of a concern, color lift here tells the story. Once we get water off the page, what's left isn't much. Sure, there is a ghosting layer, but it is very faint, and if you are in a harsh light situation or have any glare on the page, recovering what you wrote is not going to be an easy affair. And that leaves us with the writing samples. First up is Tomoe River, and my first thought out of this broad nib is that this ink is pink. I mean, it's starting to bring back Pelikan 4001 Brilliant Red vibes. And, I mean, not only is it pink, but it is a bold pink at that. So if you're a fan of pink inks and use TR or a similar paper, then Ruby Red is a good one for you. I mean, now, once I adjust my expectations and I accept that it is what it is, I will admit that having this ink start closer to those transition tones out of a broad nib is definitely working in its favor. That also helps make up for the lack of dynamic range that's on display. If you are a faster writer, you will see more dynamics, and using a thinner nib width will help with that as well. But on TR, if you're expecting a red ink with some nice bold tones and maybe a bit of burgundy, then you will need to look elsewhere. If you are looking for an ink that looks like an uncut ruby and aren't worried about water, then yeah, this ink is a good ink for you. But does this carry on over to Rhodia? Well, let's find out. If I was going to go with this ink full time, then Rhodia would have to be my paper of choice. Though the dynamic range is essentially gone, we are getting more of the red parts of the ruby that is in this ink, and less of the pink. One of the other things I'm noticing here is that I'm actually maintaining my nib width, for the most part. Some of the other Kaweco inks we've looked at have had issues with being dry enough to lower the nib width by 1 or 2, and the consistency here is actually a nice change of pace. Another thing with this ink that I hadn't seen with the others is a potential for feathering. On Rhodia, like actual feathering. It's been a while since we've seen that, and I don't know if it's coming through as we're doing the writing sample for the camera, but it did happen once or twice when I was doing the writing sample for the script. So that is something that you will want to take into account. With this ink, there are a lot of factors at play. Ruby Red is going to be very dependent on nib and paper. more so than we see from other inks in this line. Some of the universal traits, though, are, the good lubrication, and with this one, flow, which, if this is a color that you are interested in, you can be assured that hard starting and skipping aren't in the cards for you. And that does it for our look at Kaweco Ruby Red. If you like that video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you like these reviews and want to help support the channel every month, click on that Patreon link down below. Till the next video, don't drink the ink.